In the following days, Samuel cooked 3 meals a day at home as usual and accompanied Henry. Just as dawn broke on Sunday, Samuel was awakened by the ringing of his mobile phone on the bedside table. "Hello." Levi's voice came from the other end of the phone. "Are you up? Get dressed and let's go." Upon hearing Levi's words, Samuel instantly became much more energetic. "Is it there?" "Levi, yes, it's right there." Samuel got out of bed and started to get dressed. "Didn't you say it would be a week later?" "Levi, how many days have you been at home?" Samuel was still half asleep and didn't react immediately. 7 days. "Levi, a week is exactly 7 days." Samuel quickly packed his suitcase. Since he was in a hurry and didn't have time to make breakfast, he made a bowl of instant noodles for Henry and left a small note by the way. By the time he got in the car, Samuel's fair forehead was covered with a thin layer of fine sweat. "Levi, what have you been doing? You're so tired." Samuel gasped for breath. Getting up. At this moment, every strand of the young man's tousled hair seemed to testify to his hectic morning. Looking at Samuel, who was as tired as a dog, Levi said, "What kind of image is this?" Samuel, "The breadwinner of the family going out to make money." Then he looked at Levi and asked, "Don't I look like one?" Levi looked numb. "You do." The two of them were in a hurry all the way. Fortunately, Samuel still had plenty of time to get his makeup and styling done after arriving at the filming set. The stylist ruffled Samuel's hair. "Your role will wrap up in 2 more days." "Samuel, that's quite fast." The stylist, "What are your plans after the wrap-up?" Without hesitation, Samuel said, "Go home." The stylist, "I'm talking about your career. Take it 1 step at a time." The stylist smiled and said, "I didn't expect you to be so steady and down to earth, Samuel. After all, I only get a job once every 6 months." Samuel changed into his costume and came to the set. Elizabeth saw him and stepped forward. "Long time no see." Samuel also greeted her and asked, "Have you finished dealing with everything?" "Yes, I have." Then Elizabeth pulled Samuel to a corner and said, "Be careful about everything you do when you come to visit the set today." Samuel was a little puzzled and asked, "Why should I be careful?" "The people who came to visit the set are from Owen's family. They have a lot of influence. If they don't take a fancy to someone, who knows how they'll cause trouble." This scene is about Moo about to confess his love to the female lead. There are only 2 lines in total, inviting the female lead to meet on the bridge the next day. Samuel and Elizabeth started filming, and there were quite a few people watching around. Gabriel looked at the person in the middle of the crowd and asked, "Is that him?" Owen nodded. "There's nothing special about him." Rarely, Owen didn't look down on him and said, "He's very special. He's different from others." "Such as?" "He dared to scold me." Gabriel looked at Owen and for a moment thought he was some kind of masochist and said, "If you like him, just spend some money to get him and have some fun." "How vulgar. What I want is love." "Owen, can't I make him fall in love with me on his own?" "Why?" Just as Owen was about to speak, the next moment he heard his own brother say, "Because of your bad temper?" Owen gritted his teeth. "Because of my sincere heart." Gabriel carefully sized up the person in the group who seemed a bit familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before, but he just couldn't remember. Then he didn't torture himself either. Since he couldn't remember, probably wasn't that important. "You wait. After he finishes filming, I'll go and confess my feelings to him and give him a surprise." "Gabriel, do you think this is a surprise?" "Owen, I like him. Isn't that surprising enough? You're only like me in this aspect. Handsome and wealthy, confident enough." Gabriel didn't try to discourage him anymore. His phone vibrated in his pocket. "I'll go answer a call." Owen waved his hand impatiently. "Hurry up and go." Gabriel walked a short distance away. "The reception today is postponed." Gabriel raised his eyebrows. I was just about to say the same thing. I have some things to do today. Haven't you returned to the country yet? I came back yesterday. Then what's the matter? It's my younger brother's marriage. Then Gabriel asked curiously, what's that snoring sound on your end? I'm eating instant noodles. Well, what's going on? Although I missed your wedding, I've recently heard that the fussy girl you married takes excellent care of you. Gabriel joked. How's your married life? Henry looked down at the small note on the table and said, it's not bad. On the other end, Samuel had just finished filming. After thanking the staff, he was suddenly stopped as he was walking out. Looking at the familiar nostrils, Samuel said, long time no see. Owen was about to say something when he heard Samuel continue, it's okay if we don't see each other. Owen took a deep breath and said, I have something to tell you. What's the matter? Being asked. The young master looked a bit shy and said, let's talk somewhere private. Samuel firmly refused. No way. Why? I need to talk to you. Owen looked at Samuel in disbelief, as if saying it was a favor for Samuel. I just don't want to. I want to confess to you. Samuel was startled and said, then let's go somewhere private. The two went to a corner. Owen organized his words in his mind and said, I. Samuel said, I reject. Owen was surprised and asked, why? Because I don't like you. Why don't you like me? Samuel's expression seemed to say, don't you have a clue in your own mind? Owen didn't give up. But Samuel, I like you. I was deeply attracted to you during our last argument. You're the first one who dared to talk to me like that. It's giving off that cheesy romance vibe. Samuel thought that he couldn't go head to head with this young master, so he spoke in a gentle tone. Thank you for your affection, but I decline. Owen was taken aback. Why? Am I not handsome? Don't I have money? No, it's my own problem. What problem? I don't like guys like you. Owen got angry. Tell me what you don't like about me and I'll change it. I actually liked the way you disliked me before. Owen took a deep breath. Apart from these, what kind of guys do you like? Samuel didn't hesitate. I like older and wealthy guys. Owen, who was 2 years younger than Samuel, gritted his teeth. Anything else? Guys who are a bit cold to me. Anything else? Guys who don't look down on me. Owen clenched his teeth. You. Samuel raised his hand. It's my fault for being ungrateful. You're great, but I'm not worthy of you. Forget about me and move on to the next one. Owen frowned and looked at the other person. Why do you have such strange taste in people? Samuel said, you're not much better. Owen was excited. I really like you. I also really like that place. Seeing that the person rejected Owen, he looked at the person and was silent for a while. Then he took out a card from his pocket and stuffed it into the person's hand. Samuel was puzzled. What's this for? Owen took a deep breath. If you don't want to have a relationship with me, then I can only keep you. What do you mean by keeping me? To make you have a relationship with me. Samuel looked at the young master in front of him with a numb expression. Why do you think I'll agree to be kept by you? Owen said without hesitation. Didn't you say you like rich people? Samuel raised his hand and stuffed the card back into the person's hand. I refuse. The money from my recent few films is all here. It's a large amount. I advise you not to lose the big because of my age. Besides what? My age will increase in the future. As soon as Owen finished speaking, he saw that the other person was still very stubborn and quickly stuffed the card into his pocket. I don't want it. Why? Then he saw the person take out a gold card from his pocket. Because I have plenty of money. Do you dislike me so much? Samuel said in a tactful tone. Well, I do dislike you a bit. What do you dislike about me? Your breathing. Samuel came back from his serious business and said, I dislike your bad temper. your arrogance, your rudeness, and your lack of kindness." Owen was taken aback and said, "Stop." Samuel looked at him and said, "What's wrong? I haven't finished yet." He originally thought that the other person would only painstakingly pick out one or two flaws from his perfect self, but he didn't expect to hear a whole bunch. "That's enough." Owen gritted his teeth and looked at the other person. "So, no matter what I do today, you won't agree to me, right?" Samuel said seriously, "Not in this lifetime." Owen glanced at him and said, "Then I'll come again the day after tomorrow." Samuel thought silently for a moment and said, "All right." Owen was surprised and asked, "Really?" Samuel nodded. Owen was a bit excited and said, "Then wait for me to confess to you again the day after tomorrow." Then he turned around and left excitedly. Only after seeing Owen's departing back did Samuel heave a sigh of relief. If he hadn't said so, he might have been trapped here for who knows how long. When Samuel returned, Levi asked, "Where did you go? I couldn't find you just now." "Someone came to see me." "Who?" "Owen." Levi was shocked and asked, "What did he want from you?" Samuel didn't intend to tell anyone what Owen had confessed to him. Moreover, it was better for fewer people to know about this. Could also be considered as leaving some dignity for Owen. Admiring his nostrils. It was absurd, but somehow it was convincing. Owen came back excitedly. Gabriel looked at him and said, "He was stimulated after being rejected." Owen glared at him. "No, I wasn't." Gabriel was surprised. "Did he agree?" "No, he didn't." Gabriel understood after hearing this and said, "Well, that's still normal." "What?" "It's nothing." Gabriel looked at him. "What are you going to do next?" "I'll confess my love to him the day after tomorrow." Gabriel was puzzled. "Why the day after tomorrow?" "Because he rejected me before." "Didn't you use the method I taught you?" Owen was a bit down. "I used it, but he wasn't interested." Gabriel raised his eyebrows. "Did he think being kept was an insult to him?" Owen said, "He thought the money wasn't enough." Gabriel took a deep breath. "Then why don't you add more?" "But he also said he had plenty of money." Gabriel looked numb. Great. For nearly 2 days after that, Owen was in an excited state. Early the day after tomorrow, he got up very early, put on a suit, styled his hair, and stuffed the small note with the script into his pocket before going to the crew early. "Good morning." The staff member who was greeted was startled. This young master must have been possessed by a ghost today. He actually took the initiative to say hello. Owen looked around. He didn't see Samuel until noon. Then, unable to bear it any longer, he found the stylist in charge of Samuel's styling. "Where is he?" The stylist who was grabbed looked confused. "Who?" "Samuel." The stylist said, "He left last night." Owen frowned. "Where did he go?" "Back home." "Owen, why did he go back home? Did something happen at home?" The stylist, "No." "Then when will he come back?" "He's already finished filming." "Why would he come back?" After Samuel finished filming, he politely said goodbye to the crew members and then rushed back to the neighboring city in a hurry. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning when he arrived. Samuel entered the password to open the door and then sneaked into the house with his suitcase. Early the next morning, Henry came downstairs and saw a large lump curled up on the sofa. Henry stepped forward to take a look. Just then, Samuel heard the noise and slightly squinted his eyes. After seeing the man, he said, "Good morning. When did you come back?" Samuel had no intention of getting up at all. "Last night." The man frowned and said, "Why are you sleeping here?" "I'm too tired to go upstairs." The moment Samuel walked in the door last night, he seemed to be drained of all his strength. Looking at the stairs was like looking at mountains. "I can't climb up." Just as Henry was about to say something, the next moment he heard the man lying on the sofa grunt and say, "Can you get me a quilt?" Unexpectedly, The man said nothing and turned away. Seeing the man leave, Samuel buried his face in the pillow and planned to go on sleeping. It doesn't matter if there is no quilt. Anyway, he can still sleep. Before long, he felt something heavy on his body. Half asleep and half awake, he lifted his eyelids and saw the quilt on him. It had a faint and pleasant fragrance. Samuel turned his head slightly, squinted his eyes and smiled. "Thank you." It was already past 10 o'clock in the morning when he was fully awake. Samuel sat up on the sofa and looked down. Only then did he find that the quilt covering him was not his own but Henry's. First, he carried the quilt to his own room. After tidying up and changing his clothes, he went to the kitchen to make some sandwiches. Samuel stood in front of the study door and knocked. "Henry, it's me." The man's voice came from inside. "Come in." Samuel walked in, put the sandwiches on the table and said, "Have some. They were just made." Henry looked at the dark circles under the man's eyes and said, "Why didn't you come back today?" Samuel lowered his head shyly and said, "I wanted to see you earlier." Then he looked at Henry's expression and said, "Don't you believe me?" Henry said stiffly, "No." Samuel looked stern and said, "I saw a hint of guilt in your eyes." Henry was silent for a while and then got straight to the point. "What made you come back overnight?" Samuel told the truth. "I encountered some troubles on the set." Henry frowned after hearing that and asked, "What kind of troubles?" "A romantic ordeal." "Samuel, there's an actress on the set who confessed to me." Before Samuel could finish his sentence, he heard the man say, "You agreed. Treat it as if it never happened. I already have you, and—" Henry raised his eyebrows and asked, "And what?" Thinking about falling in love in the entertainment industry is ruining one's future. "I'm very professional." Saying that, Samuel patted his own chest and said, "So I got married." Henry looked at him and asked, "It's not okay to fall in love, but it's okay to get married." Samuel shook his head seriously and said, "Actually, it's also not okay because my agent won't allow me to talk about it." They had negotiated during the movie audition before. He promised Levi not to mention Henry, and the other party promised not to create a single-person persona for him. Henry frowned and asked, "Then why did you choose to get married at that time?" Samuel was already in the entertainment industry when he got married. Samuel lowered his head shyly and said, "Because I like you. Between you and my future, I chose you without hesitation. But I don't regret making this decision." Samuel bent down and looked the other person in the eye at the same level and said, "Because you are my future." Henry was about to say something when Samuel reached out and stopped him. With a solemn look on his face, he said, "You don't need to say a word. I know everything and understand it all. I know this marriage is just my one-sided wish, but my feelings for you are real, and my love for you is also real." Samuel pressed his fair finger against the man's lips. "I know you don't like me, and I don't expect you to reciprocate my feelings. I only hope to accompany you until you recover." Then he pretended to be sad. "Don't worry, I won't pester you. When you recover from your illness, we'll get a divorce. By then, I'll leave with the kindness you've shown me, and you can start a new life." The man looked at the expression on his face, unable to figure it out. "You—" Before the other man could finish speaking, Samuel interrupted him. "So, please don't push me away now, okay?" After he finished speaking, the man was silent for a while, then looked at him and said, "Samuel, you're stepping on my foot." Samuel bounced up like a ball, and his fluffy hair trembled accordingly. "Sorry, I didn't notice just now." Samuel looked at the man's face and asked cautiously, "Is it serious?" There was no obvious emotional fluctuation on Henry's face. "It's okay." Samuel let out a sigh of relief. "It seems that I'm not that important to you. After all, someone is as important as Mount Tai, while I'm just a corner of it. Then he pushed the sandwich in his hand towards the man. Hurry up and eat. I added extra ham for you. The man picked up a piece. Samuel stood up. You eat first. I'll go downstairs to get you a glass of water. As he said that, he clomped downstairs in his slippers. When Samuel came back with a glass of water and stood at the study door, the 3 sandwiches that were originally on the plate were all gone. Samuel stepped forward and was silent for a few seconds. It only took him about 3 minutes to go up and down. Then he looked at Henry. Haven't you eaten for several days? The man coughed twice. I eat every day. Samuel still stared at him. Henry said, I just don't eat much. Henry himself was also a bit confused about his own psychology. Since he got married, perhaps he had gotten used to eating the food cooked by the other person. After the other person left, everything he ate seemed to taste wrong, just like the instant noodles before. He never ate such junk food before, but he thought the ones Samuel made for him were okay. Later, when he bought the same ones to eat, he always felt the taste was different and would throw them away after just one bite. Throw them away. Looking at the empty plate, Samuel thought for a moment and said, Do you need me to make some more for you? No need. Samuel was a bit surprised. Do you have a small appetite? Henry looked a bit unnatural. There are still 2 hours until lunch. That's fine. Samuel clapped his hands and turned around. He had just woken up from a nap and was very energetic now. Then you can drink some water first, to fill your stomach a bit. After all, there are still 2 hours until lunch. Samuel sat in the study for a while and then went downstairs to make lunch. Then he came up again and planned to push the person downstairs. But when they reached the elevator, the person didn't lift their hand for a long time. Samuel was puzzled. Is the elevator broken? No. Samuel was instantly shocked. Did the other person want him to carry him downstairs? But thinking that he was being paid, Samuel bent down and patted his own shoulder manfully. Come on. Henry was confused. What are you doing? Samuel tilted his head slightly to look at the person. To carry you downstairs. No need. Henry said, Press your finger on it. Samuel wondered, Where? Henry said, The elevator. Me? The young man's expression was exaggerated, as if he had won a lottery worth hundreds of millions. He looked at the elevator and then at his own finger. The man's expression was calm. Yes. Really? Samuel confirmed repeatedly. Can I really do it? The man looked at him without saying a word, but he did give his tacit consent. The next moment, the young man suddenly threw himself on the man. Henry, you are really so nice. I love you even more. As he said that, he hugged the man and shook him excitedly, like a puppy shaking its fur. But along with it came an extremely empty sense of guilt. Samuel hugged the man and felt a bit uncomfortable for a moment. Did the other person's allowing him to input his fingerprint mean that he had begun to trust him, while his purpose? Then Samuel decided that he would definitely be even better to the man. Samuel looked at the fingerprint recognition screen next to the elevator, like a country bumpkin. What do I need to do? Henry said, Press your finger on it. Which finger do I need to use? It's up to you. The next moment, Henry saw Samuel sticking out the middle finger. The lunch was neither too much nor too little. 3 dishes and 1 soup were enough for 2 people. Looking at the familiar peaks in the bowl, Henry picked up his chopsticks, while Samuel stuffed food into his mouth. Have you gone out these days? No. Then I'll push you out for a walk later. It's almost autumn. Take advantage of the warm weather and get some sun. Henry, it doesn't matter. Hearing this, Samuel buried his head and stuffed food into his mouth. After all, the other person's "it doesn't matter" meant agreement. He really understands him too well. The lunch was eaten up cleanly. Samuel gulped down a glass of water and waited for the midday sun to subside before pushing Henry out. Fortunately, they didn't meet the old vagrant this time. Samuel looked at the road ahead. Every time they came out, it was always in the villa area. Let's go out for a walk. Henry glanced at him. Samuel could see the obvious resistance. He also knew very well that Henry was very proud and didn't want strangers to look at him with pity. But he still said, "We won't go far. Just to the nearby park." The man didn't say a word. Samuel looked at the top of the man's head. "I've passed by there several times but never been in. Everything has a first time." The previous sentence was an excuse, and the latter was a persuasion. Since Henry remained unmoved, Samuel continued to persuade him. "I've never been there and I want to have a look. What kind of couple doesn't go to the park together? Do all couples go? Even elderly couples go square dancing together." Henry said coldly, "Just this once." Samuel quickly nodded his head. Okay. Then he put on a smile and pushed Henry out of the villa area. When they arrived at the park, they found there were quite a lot of people. Samuel pushed Henry along under the shade of the trees. Looking into the distance, he found a rather large sandpit for amusement. Samuel curiously poked his head out to take a look, then patted Henry on the shoulder. "Let's go over there and have a look." Henry glanced at him but didn't say anything. The man didn't clearly refuse, and Samuel excitedly pushed the man and walked over. There were quite a few people in the sandpit, and most of them were children playing with the sand. There were only 2 steps in total. Samuel got off and looked up at the man. "Do you want to come down and play?" Henry? "No." However, just as he was halfway through speaking, his hand was grabbed. Samuel looked at the man expectantly. "Come on." Henry still refused. "No need." Samuel opened his eyes wide in disbelief. "What? It's so much fun." When he was a child in the orphanage, he always lived on campus and worked part-time beside it. He basically had no family to accompany him. Today, seeing many children playing with sand, Samuel thought carefully and realized that he seemed never to have played like this when he was a child. For a moment, his curiosity was overwhelming. The other person's gaze was too intense. Henry slightly turned his head away. "I don't want to. Go on." Samuel brought his face close to the man. Henry dodged and turned to the other side. Samuel followed suit. "Go on." Then, while saying so, he held the man's hand and shook it. His little mouth was like chanting a spell. "Go on, go on, go on, go on." Henry frowned and scolded. "Samuel." Samuel instantly shut his chattering little mouth. "Don't act coquettishly in public." Samuel leaned his fluffy head over. "If you accompany me down, I won't bother you." Then he pointed at the fairly large sandpit. "The kids playing inside all have companions. They all have someone to accompany them." His sincere look at that moment was extremely similar to that of a pyramid schemer. "It's so much fun." Henry looked at him and said, "Have you ever played?" "No." Samuel shook his head. "But who can resist the sand that can be used to build castles?" People were silent. Samuel continued to pester. "Henry, go, go, go. I think I want you to accompany me every time." Samuel blinked his eyes at the man twice. Henry looked ugly and said, "Just this once." Samuel had lost count of how many times the other person had said this to him, but he still quickly replied, Okay, let's go." As he said that, he stepped forward to pull the man. Henry's eyebrows twitched. "What are you doing?" Samuel looked expectant. "Let's go down and play with the sand." Then he continued, "The wheelchair can't go down. Otherwise, the wheel frame will get filled with sand. Let's go down together." "Samuel." The man's tone was rarely a bit erratic and flustered. But Samuel didn't stop his actions and repeated again, "Let's go down together." Henry held the hand that was trying to pull him. "Let go of me." "What? I don't want to go." "No, you've already promised me." Henry frowned. He knew that the other person was being stubborn. Usually, This kind of phenomenon was just the other person talking big, and it would even get wilder if it got worse. I'm not going. Samuel looked utterly incredulous. How could you lie? I don't want to go. Samuel glanced at him and then drooped his head. I know everything. It's not that you don't like the sand. It's that you don't like me. So, the man's voice was irritated. Fine. Samuel looked at him pitifully. Henry took a deep breath and said helplessly, let's go down. Okay. Then he stepped forward to support the man. Let's go down together. While being happy, he didn't forget to flatter. Henry, you're the best. However, Samuel almost used all his strength to prop the man up. It was obvious that he was using all his might, and he was even trembling. After propping the man up, he still pretended to be relaxed and said, let's go. Then he propped the man up and walked towards the sandpit. His fair little face was flushed from exertion, and the veins on his neck stood out. When he spoke, his breath was a bit short. Be careful when going down the steps. Henry looked at him. His legs had no feeling at all, but every word from the other person made it seem as if he could walk. Samuel carefully led the man to the ground and then took a breath. He really didn't expect the other person to be so heavy that his calves were trembling. Fortunately, the distance was less than half a meter. Otherwise, he might have definitely fallen into the sandpit with the man. But his fatigue was soon attracted by the sand beneath him. Samuel first stroked the sand with his hand and then gradually got into the mood and started to play wildly. While playing, a little kid with a bucket suddenly came up beside him. Do you want to play with me, big brother? Samuel didn't refuse. Sure. Then the little kid asked, who did you come with? The little kid pointed at a person with a baby not far away and said, I came with my aunt's little baby. Then the little kid tilted his head and asked innocently, brother, who did you come with? Samuel pointed at the dark-faced man beside him and said, I came with my old baby. The little girl looked back and asked, is that uncle still a baby even though he's so old? Samuel nodded and said, although he's old, he'll always be my old baby. The little girl was a bit surprised and asked, then why does your old baby not seem very happy? Samuel thought for a while and said, maybe it's because he doesn't have the little bucket and small shovel in your hand. Samuel stared at the little yellow plastic bucket and small shovel in the little girl's hand. It was obvious that he was very tempted and asked, did you bring this from home? The little girl shook her head and said, no, my aunt bought it for me. Samuel's eyes instantly sparkled and he asked, where is it? Over there. The little girl pointed. Sure enough, a vendor selling sand playing tools was seen not far away. Samuel got up, tempted. The next moment, he felt someone tugging at his pants. Looking down, he saw the little girl looking up at him and asking, brother, what are you doing? Samuel rubbed his hands excitedly and said, brother wants to buy a little bucket and shovel like yours. The little girl looked a bit embarrassed and asked, then what about your old baby? Samuel looked back and saw the man sitting in the sandpit with a dark face. Aren't you afraid your old baby will get lost if you leave him here? Samuel thought for a moment, then bent down and said, can you help brother take care of him for a while? Brother will come back soon after buying things. The little girl seemed to be entrusted with a sacred mission and said, of course I can. Can brother ask what your name is? My name is Tian Tian. Okay, Tian Tian. Brother will be back soon. Thank you for your help. Tian Tian nodded her little head. Seeing the person walking away, she also ran towards Henry on her short legs. Then she plopped down beside the man, looking up with her chubby face. Hello, uncle. The man looked down at the little girl. Tian Tian almost trembled instantly. Brother's old baby is really fierce. But she didn't forget the mission left by her brother. She still gathered her courage and said, it was the brother just now who asked me to come. Henry then spoke after hearing that, What did he ask you to do? Brother asked me to watch over uncle. The difference in these two generational titles made the man frown. Did he ask you to call me uncle? Tian shook her head. No. Brother said you are brother's old baby. What did he do? Brother went to buy a small shovel. Not long after the little girl finished speaking, she saw Samuel coming back from not far away with a small pink bucket in his hand. Tian looked at it and said, Brother, your bucket's color is so beautiful. Samuel nodded in satisfaction. Then he gave Henry one of the plastic tools inside. I picked this especially for you. Do you like it? Turned out to be a big black plastic spoon in his hand. The man looked up at the other person. Samuel gave a shy smile. You're welcome. Then he took out his own pink spoon of the same style. Let's use couple ones. Actually, Samuel also wanted to buy other colors, but when he was buying, the vendors had almost sold out, and almost all the remaining ones were pink. Samuel had a hard time finding spoons in other colors. Seeing that the man was holding the black spoon and not moving for a long time, Samuel said, Take it. It's for you to dig with for fun. Henry looked at the small pink bucket and a bunch of small shovels in Samuel's hand. Why is the color different from yours? Samuel glanced at him. Yours is black. I know. Then why is yours pink? Samuel hugged his small pink bucket. Because it suits me better than you. Pink is delicate. How old are you now? Seeing the man's obviously darkened face, Samuel quickly leaned in again. I'm just joking with you. Even if you're old and gray, I still like you. Besides. What? Samuel shyly lowered his head. You'll always be 18 in my heart. No matter how old you grow. Henry frowned. Enough. However, the other's great declaration of motherly love continued. You're still a baby in my heart. Saying that, he took out another shovel from his pile of pink shovels and handed it to the other person. Take it and play with it. The man took it numbly. At this time, Samuel felt his arm sink. Brother, do you want to play together? Tian tugged at the man's arm and issued a sincere invitation. Of course. Samuel took out a cute pink shovel. Because Samuel bought a lot. The vendor specially gave away 2 bottles of water which were helpful for building sandcastles. They had just started piling up the sand for a short while when Samuel felt as if something tiny and light was patting his face. He turned his head and saw 2 little boys throwing sand in their direction. Before Samuel could say a word, the next moment, he saw Ella stand up and shout, What are you doing? Samuel also straightened up. Seeing this, the 2 little boys timidly took a few steps back, but soon shifted their target. They raised their hands and threw sand in Henry's direction. Ella stepped forward bravely and said, What are you doing? That's my brother's dear one. Okay. So it can move. We thought it couldn't move. One of the little boys said mischievously and was about to throw sand again. Ella ran over to Henry in a hurry and shouted, No, no, no. Seeing that the 2 brats were about to throw sand again, Samuel quickly stepped forward as if infected and shouted, What are you doing? This is my dear one. Okay. Seeing this, the 2 little boys threw the sand in their hands aside and muttered impolitely, These kids are so boring. Ella asked, What did you say? I said you're just a little kid. Naya. The 2 little boys wrinkled their noses and stuck out their tongues at the little girl, making a face, saying that they quickly threw a handful of sand at the group. While running away, one of them kicked down the sandcastle that Samuel and Henry had just built. The little girl collapsed and sat on the ground. Henry reached out to help her sit up straight. Samuel looked back at the 2 of them and saw Henry squinting one eye. He asked, What's wrong? Henry replied, It's nothing. Samuel picked up the little girl and comforted her. Then he leaned over and asked, Did sand get in your eye? Henry replied indifferently, Yes. Don't move. I'll blow the sand out for you. Henry almost reflexively refused. No need. However, Samuel held Henry's head firmly and said, "Don't move." Seeing Samuel's lips getting closer, Henry subconsciously closed his eyes and turned his head away. "Samuel, how can I blow if you close your eyes?" Saying that, he straightened the man's face again. After blowing on his eyes, Samuel began to comfort Tian. But the little girl was really sad looking at the destroyed castle, with tears welling up in her eyes. Samuel hugged the little girl and swayed her, patting the sand off her little clothes. "There's nothing to cry about, Tian. But big brother, the castle is broken. It doesn't matter. We can still build it." Samuel looked at the little girl. "But there's a more important thing we need to do now." "What is it?" "Destroy their sandcastles." Tian was stunned. "You did very well just now. But when someone bullies us, we have to fight back." Saying that, he picked up the little girl's small yellow shovel and stuffed it into her tiny hand. "Let's cause some destruction." "But big brother, I'm a girl. Isn't this not very good?" Samuel looked as if he had suddenly realized something. "I understand." Henry's eyebrows twitched, and he had a bad feeling in his heart. Sure enough, the next moment Samuel took the small yellow shovel from the little girl's hand and replaced it with his own small pink shovel. "You use the pink one. Great." Then Samuel suddenly turned back and looked at Henry. "Wait for me here. I'll be back soon." Saying that, he took the little girl away. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, the shouts of 2 little boys came from not far away, noisy and ear-piercing. Not long after, Samuel came running back very happily. "Henry." The man looked at the smile on the other person's face and said, "Did you succeed?" Samuel nodded and said, "Yes." "Where is the person?" Samuel knew who the other person was referring to and said, Tian went back to find her aunt." Then he took out his phone to check the time and said, "It's getting late. Let's go back too." Immediately afterwards, Henry watched Samuel do a set of stretches. "Samuel. Huh. What are you doing?" "Nothing. Just moving around." Then he was about to reach out to support the other person. Who would have thought that the other person would stare at him? Samuel felt a bit stiff and asked, "What's wrong?" Henry looked at him and said, "Sand." Samuel frowned and said, "Why are you scolding me?" Henry took a deep breath and said, "There's sand on your head." After hearing that, Samuel shook his head like a dog shaking its fur and asked, "Is there still any?" "Yes." "Then help me get it off." Then a fluffy head leaned over. Henry looked at him and then raised his hand to gently pat the person's head a few times. When it was done, Samuel straightened up again. "All right." Saying that, he took a deep breath, picked the person up, and staggered up the steps with the person in his arms. After Henry sat in the wheelchair, he clearly heard the person behind him take a big gasp. The man curled his fingers on his legs. Next time I'll still bring you here." The man's body stiffened. He turned back to look at the person, only to see the person smiling and saying, "Otherwise, it'll be a waste to have bought the shovel." Okay. Being thrifty and good at managing the household. Samuel pushed the person back. "It was really too hot. I guess it'll be autumn in about 2 weeks. Henry responded faintly, "Yeah." Samuel pushed the person along, stopping from time to time, thinking about what to eat for dinner tonight. On the way, he saw a fruit shop. Samuel looked down at the person. "Did you eat any fruits these days when I was not at home?" After Samuel left, Henry mostly stayed in the company and didn't pay much attention to his diet. "No." Samuel glanced at the fruit stall outside the shop. There were out-of-season oranges and strawberries. "Let's buy some fruits." Seeing there were quite a lot of people going in and out of the shop, Henry frowned. "You go. I'll wait for you here." "Okay." Samuel noticed the resistance in the person's eyes. He bent down to lock the wheelchair. Then he straightened up and looked at the person, saying, "Stay here and don't move." I'll buy you some oranges. Samuel walked towards the fruit shop. Henry watched the cars coming and going on the road. A black Bentley sped by, and then slowly reversed back after a few seconds. Henry! The window rolled down, and the man in the driver's seat slightly lowered his sunglasses. The woman sitting in the passenger seat looked and quickly echoed, Mason, who is this? Mason looked at the man and his tone became a bit sarcastic. An old classmate. The woman saw what Mason was thinking and pretended to be surprised on her face. This? Her tone was full of disgust, but her eyes never left the man's face. Although the man was sitting in a wheelchair, his appearance and temperament were extraordinary. If his lower body worked well, he would also be a top-notch man, and he seemed quite wealthy. The man's black pupils showed no emotion, like a stagnant pool of water that was still and impossible to see to the bottom. Mason leaned back on the car seat. Henry, why are you here alone? Can't you go back by yourself? Mason drove the car with the woman and looked at Henry sitting by the roadside. He was extremely superior and said in a haughty tone, If you beg me, maybe I'll be kind enough to give you a ride back. The woman beside him quickly said with an adoring face, Mason is so kind-hearted. While speaking, she often glanced in Henry's direction. Mason, do you want me to go down and help him get in? It's not convenient for him to move. Mason glanced at him. He hasn't begged me yet. How can I let him in? Then he looked at Henry again. Hey, if you ask me, I'll let her go down to help you. How about it? However, Henry didn't even look at them and just averted his gaze. Mason got angry when he saw this. Hey! What? Mason suddenly trembled. The next moment, Samuel was seen standing in the distance with several bags of fruits in his hands. Just now, when he came out of the fruit store, he saw Henry sitting by the roadside in the distance. There was a black car parked there. Although he didn't know the brand well, it seemed very expensive. But hearing the one who roared at him as his dear, Samuel staggered back with the fruits in his hands. Then he crouched down to take a look. Oh, it's you, Crow. Mason almost developed a psychological shadow as soon as he saw Samuel. Samuel put the fruits on Henry's lap and asked him to hold them. What are you doing here? Mason swallowed hard, with obvious panic on his face. What else could I be doing? I saw him by the roadside and kindly wanted to send him home. Samuel made a sound of doubt. Really? Really? I believe you. Then why the hell did you ask? Seeing Samuel's gaze, for some reason, a sense of guilt gradually welled up in Mason's heart. He casually made an excuse. By the way, there will be a class reunion in a few days. I came here to invite Henry, by the way. Really? Of course. Then invite me and see. The woman sitting in the passenger seat also clearly noticed Mason's embarrassment. Mason glanced at the woman and Samuel. Still being stubborn and unwilling to lose face, he forced himself to speak up. Henry, I sincerely invite you to the class reunion the day after tomorrow. Samuel scratched his head. I thought so. Then he turned to look at Henry. Do you want to go? This was a great opportunity to humiliate Henry. Seeing there was hope, Mason quickly continued. Go. We haven't gathered for a long time. Only after Mason finished speaking did Henry glance at him. Mason, what's up? What's there to gather for with just 3 people? Mason seemed to be instantly silenced by this sentence. He forgot that the 2 of them studied abroad in college. And now there are only 3 classmates in the country. Samuel wondered, who's the other one? William. Samuel? Oh. The woman looked at Henry's face and quickly said, Mason likes a lively atmosphere. Besides, why can't 3 people gather? Isn't this a sign of deep friendship? You think so, right, Mason? Mason looked numb. I have deep friendship with him. Mason looked at Samuel. I've already invited you. Please give me some face. Henry? Whose face? Mason was about to burst out with swear words, but looking at Samuel, He took a deep breath. My grandfather's. The man then said indifferently, okay. After hearing this, Mason said, then it's set for the day after tomorrow. I'll send you the address when I find it. After the discussion, Mason was about to take this opportunity to imply something negative about Henry again. At this time, Samuel saw something and said, are you guys leaving or not? Mason looked dejected. In a hurry? Samuel. Just a polite inquiry. Mason pulled out the car key, looking like he was going to stay here until it got dark. The environment here is good. I just want to park here. Samuel glanced at the side again. Really? Yes. Mason put on an air of superiority. What? Is it not allowed? Samuel. It's a serious violation. Saying that, Samuel waved to a police officer a few steps away. Sorry to trouble you, comrade police officer. Looking over, they saw the police officer pick up a pen, tear off a ticket, and stick it on the car window in one smooth motion. Then the police officer smiled at Samuel and said, it's my duty. No trouble. With a gloomy face, Mason inserted the car key and started the car. Before leaving, he looked at Henry and then at Samuel. See you two the day after tomorrow. Before the words were even out, the car sped away. The police officer beside them took out the walkie-talkie. License plate number D8384 is speeding. Poor kid. Samuel hung the fruits on the wheelchair and pushed it home. What would you like to eat tonight? Henry? Anything is fine. Samuel was a bit troubled for a moment, but he still cooked a lot of things for dinner, mostly meat. After the meal, Samuel lay on the sofa like a beached fish, covering his white belly. Henry frowned when he saw this. You'll get indigestion. Samuel lazily waved his hand. I won't. Are you a glutton? Samuel pouted. Then I'll move a bit. Saying that, the beached fish lying on the sofa turned over. Samuel squinted his eyes in self-satisfaction. Will you go for a night run? Samuel squinted his eyes like a cat and looked at him slightly. Yes, I went. Do you want to exercise? Samuel shook his fluffy head. I ate it. Samuel lay there for a while and suddenly said, Henry. The man glanced at him. What's up? I want to eat an orange. Did you eat it? Samuel gave a shy smile. Fruits are another story. Henry gave him a helpless look and finally lifted an orange and handed it over. Samuel lay on the sofa peeling the orange. After a while, Henry felt a slight chill in the middle. Looking down, he saw the peeled orange segments placed in the middle. Samuel put a segment of the orange into his mouth and pretended to be nonchalant. I'm full. I just ate one segment to taste it. You can eat the rest. Then he slightly raised his head and looked at the man. The fruit shop owner said these oranges are very sweet. He's right. You should try them. Henry ate a few segments and thought they were just so. Samuel asked with bright eyes, Are they sweet? Henry slightly lowered his eyebrows and eyes, then simply said one word, Sweet. Looking at Samuel lying motionless on the sofa, Henry said, Get up and walk around. Samuel turned his head. Why? Exercise helps with digestion. It's also a kind of enjoyment. Samuel said, I'm the kind who seeks pleasure. Looking at Samuel lying limp on the sofa without moving, Henry coughed and said, I'm going upstairs. Samuel nodded to indicate that he understood. There was a moment of silence around. Push me. Samuel looked at Henry in surprise, but since the old man had asked, he had no reason to refuse. Then Samuel got up from the sofa and pushed Henry back to the third floor. 2 days passed quickly, and on the afternoon of the third day, Mason sent over the address of the hotel. When Samuel pushed Henry to the private room, there was only the woman who had previously sat in the front passenger seat of Mason's car in the room. The woman was wearing a pink long dress today, with delicate and beautiful makeup. Seeing the two of them come in, she stood up and said, You're here. As she said that, She walked to their sides and said, "Hello, my name is Ella." Samuel replied politely, "Hello, my name is Samuel." And he. Ella looked at Henry and said, "I know his name is Henry. He's an old classmate of Mason's." As she said that, she intentionally or unintentionally nudged Samuel aside and said, "You must be tired from the journey. Have some tea first. Mason has some business to deal with at his company and will be late." Samuel nodded and then pushed Henry to take a seat. Ella reached out towards the wheelchair but missed, but soon put on a smile again and handed the menu to the two of them, saying, "See what you'd like to eat. You go first." Samuel politely thanked and said, "What would you like to eat, Ms. Elizabeth?" Ella quietly glanced at Henry and then said, "I'm fine with anything. As long as you can eat enough, it's okay." Samuel nodded and said, "Okay. Would you like something to drink? I'll pour it for you." Samuel was a little surprised and said, "You're too kind, Ms. Elizabeth. It's okay. The tea in this place is good. Try it." Then she poured a cup for each of them. Just as Samuel was about to reach out and take it, he saw the fair and slender wrist tremble, and a cup of tea splashed violently on his body. "Oops." Samuel was puzzled. "What are you shouting for?" Ella. "Ah. It's me who got splashed. Just now." The other party's action was obviously deliberate, but Samuel didn't intend to care about it. "This tea is quite hot. Samuel, go to the washroom and deal with it quickly." Samuel looked back at Henry and saw that the man frowned tightly. Seeing this, Ella said, "Don't worry, Mr. Fu. I'll take care of you." The skin on his leg was a bit painful. "I'll go to the washroom." Samuel left this sentence and rushed to the washroom in a hurry. When he came out, he happened to meet Mason, who had rushed over. Samuel looked behind him. "Where's William?" Mason. "He won't come." Samuel. "Then you're quite unlucky." The two returned to the private room. When Ella saw Mason coming, she quickly stepped forward to greet him. "Mason." Mason glanced at her and said nothing. Soon, all the dishes were served. Maybe it was because the company's affairs weren't handled yet. Not long after Mason sat down, his phone rang again. "You can start eating first." Saying that, he took the phone and walked out of the private room. Ella took a bite of the dish and said, What is this? It's quite delicious." The waiter who was serving the dishes beside said, "It's stir-fried rabbit meat." Upon hearing this, Ella's eyebrows instantly drooped as she looked at Henry and said, "It's so cruel. How could?" Henry frowned, looking at the girl's mournful face. The next moment, he felt his arm sink. Looking down, he saw Samuel hugging his arm. His little mouth was shiny with oil as he said, "How can you eat rabbits?" Samuel's little mouth kept babbling, "Rabbits are so lovely. Smack, smack." Samuel pointed at the plate of rabbit meat with the arm he was hugging and said pitifully, "Henry, this is really too cruel." Looking at the little mouth shiny with oil, Henry was speechless for a moment. Then he reached out and took a tissue to wipe his mouth. Samuel didn't care. As soon as his mouth was wiped, he picked up another piece and put it into his mouth. Ella looked at him in surprise and exclaimed, "You!" Samuel's cheeks puffed in and out as he said, "Don't thank me." Seeing Samuel looking so magnanimous, he said, "This matter is too cruel. Let me bear it alone." Ella frowned and said, "You are really kind-hearted." Samuel smiled shyly and said, "I know." While eating, Samuel also picked up a few pieces of meat for Henry with his chopsticks. Then he whispered in his ear, "Try it. It's very delicious." Henry glanced at him and said, "Didn't you say you'd bear it alone?" Samuel blinked at him and said, "Husbands should share both blessings and hardships." Ella looked at him and said, "It seems that Samuel doesn't feel sorry at all. I won't let Mr. Fu do such a cruel thing." Samuel said, "Really? Of course." Samuel responded with an "oh" and stuffed another mouthful into his mouth. Then, he hugged Henry's arm and said, "He likes me like this." With his arm being hugged, the man's body stiffened imperceptibly for a moment. Ella gritted her teeth and stared at Samuel. Knowing that the other party was not an easy person to deal with, she couldn't get a word in during the meal. So, she decided not to make a fool of herself anymore. After Mason went out, he never came back. Seeing this, Samuel went to settle the bill. Although he didn't have a very good impression of Ella, he still politely said goodbye before pushing Henry away. After leaving the hotel, instead of getting in the car, Samuel said, "Let's walk back. It's also a good chance for a night run." Henry glanced at him. "Are you full?" Samuel said seriously, "One should always leave some leeway for oneself when doing things." Henry looked at the wet patch on his pants and his eyes darkened. "Let's go home first," Samuel said, "but I still want to go for a night run. There's food at home. Then let's go home." Immediately, Samuel quickly helped him into the car. The hotel was not far from the wealthy area. They arrived there in just 10 minutes. After getting home, Samuel was like a little bird about to soar, flapping his wings and planning to get some snacks from the fridge. Unexpectedly, he was grabbed by the man and his plan was thwarted halfway. Samuel staggered and looked back at Henry in confusion. "What's wrong?" Henry said, "Take off your pants." Samuel widened his eyes and almost instantly covered his waistband. "This doesn't seem appropriate." Samuel blushed and said, "I always thought ours was a platonic love." Unexpectedly, the man still repeated, "Take off your pants. Isn't this a bit too fast? We've only been together for a few months." Henry raised his eyebrows. "Not taking them off?" Samuel nodded. "Is that okay?" "No." As he said that, his tone seemed a bit impatient and turned colder. Samuel took a few steps back and tightly grabbed his waistband, looking like a shy young maiden who couldn't bear the humiliation. Henry's voice was cold. "Take them off." Samuel scowled. "You're humiliating me." The man looked at him, his gaze like that of a soaring hawk about to hunt. Samuel shivered under his gaze. "Why be so fierce? I have dignity. Take them off yourself." The man paused. "Or I'll help you." Samuel stubbornly glanced at him. "Then I'll do it myself." As he said that, he started to fumble with his belt slowly. Samuel secretly peeked at Henry, wondering what was going on in his mind. Then he opened his mouth to try to negotiate. "Can I eat something first?" As he said that, he pleaded pitifully. "I wasn't full just now." However, there was no sign of softening on the other man's face. "Eat after taking them off." Samuel swallowed hard and sat down on the sofa shakily, his fingers intertwined as if pretending to untie his waistband. At this time, the man's cold voice rang out. 10-9. Samuel's eyebrows twitched. What's going on? Then he tried to say something, but his tongue seemed to be tied. This pair of pants is hard to take off." The man looked at him indifferently. This look made Samuel instantly understand what it meant to be the fish on the chopping block. 8, 7, 6. These numbers made Samuel regain the fear of being killed by the villain. "Wait, it's too fast. I can't take them off." 5. "Darn it, pervert. Wouldn't it be okay if he took them off?" 4. Samuel lowered his head and started to untie his waistband. For some reason, fear filled his heart, and he was extremely flustered. It stuck. 3-2. Seeing that the time was almost up, Samuel gritted his teeth and just used all his strength, leaving the rest to luck. 1. "I've taken them off." Samuel was so scared that he almost broke out in a thin sweat on his forehead. At this time, he only had his underwear and a pair of white socks on his feet. Henry stepped forward. Samuel swallowed hard when he saw Henry's gaze. Samuel stammered, "I'm a bit cold. It's 28 degrees indoors." Seeing that Henry had come in front of him, Samuel sat on the sofa and tried to curl up. Unexpectedly, as soon as he moved back a little, he was grabbed by the leg and pulled back. His calf was directly placed on Henry's wheelchair. Samuel looked panicked. "What are you doing?" Henry frowned at the redness and swelling on the fair skin. "You're dealing with it?" Samuel was a bit stunned for a moment. "What?" "The leg." As he said, the man's large, well-defined hand pressed on it. Samuel almost instantly gasped. This guy must have some kind of sadistic tendency. Last time it was like this, and this time it's the same. He always likes to put pressure on the injured area. Looking at the face wrinkled in pain, Henry loosened the force on his hand. Samuel looked at the redness and swelling on his leg, which was caused by Ella spilling tea when she couldn't hold it steady before. Henry looked at the redness and swelling between his fingers. His eyes darkened. "Does it hurt?" Samuel gently pinched with his fingers. "It hurt a little at the beginning, but..." The man looked up at him. "But what?" Samuel said truthfully, "It hurts more after you pressed it." Henry let go of the hand holding Samuel's thigh, then turned around and wheeled his wheelchair into the kitchen. When he came back, he was holding an ice cream cake from the fridge and an ice pack in his hands. Samuel's eyes almost instantly found their focus, but the other man put the cake aside and took the ice pack to apply it to his leg. Samuel almost instantly retracted his leg. The man looked up at him in confusion. Looking at the ice pack still giving off white steam, Samuel explained, "This is too cold. It'll cause frostbite." After hearing this, Henry then turned around to get a towel. Samuel watched Henry's every move. "Henry. Ha! You're so nice." The man's hand holding the towel paused. Only then did he realize how abnormal his behavior was compared to before. Samuel scratched his head embarrassedly. "You were so fierce before. I thought you were going to hit me." All his attention was on the swollen part just now. After the wound was covered, Henry only then noticed that Samuel's legs were so white that they were a bit dazzling. Then he averted his gaze. "Call a doctor if it gets serious." After throwing out this sentence, he turned around and left. Samuel didn't care. He ate the ice cream cake while applying the compress to his leg. After applying the compress for a while, Samuel went upstairs to his room. Just as he was lying in bed about to fall asleep, the phone beside him suddenly vibrated. Samuel picked it up and saw that it was a message. "Isabella." "It's me, sister." Samuel tapped on the keyboard. "I know. There's a note." "Isabella. How have you been lately?" Samuel. "Not bad." "Isabella. Are you free lately? Another blind date?" "No. I've been bored at home lately and want to go camping." Samuel's eyes lit up. He had never been camping before. "Is it fun?" "Of course. Would I lie to you, sister? How about going to the mountain to watch the meteors?" "Wanna go?" "Samuel, I have a question." "What question?" "Can I bring my family?" Isabella directly made a voice call. Samuel answered the call and got straight to the point. "Can I take Henry with me? Otherwise, leaving him at home to run wild on his own, Samuel would feel guilty." Isabella said, "You can." There was some hesitation in the other person's voice. "Is he willing?" Ever since that fire, Henry's temperament had changed drastically. Isabella knew this. Although Samuel had the intention, he was afraid that Henry might not be willing. "And it's on the mountain." Samuel thought for a while and said, "Then can I ask him tomorrow and give you an answer?" Isabella replied, "Sure." Seeing that it was getting late, Isabella said, "Have a good dream, dear." Samuel responded, "Mm." Samuel lay on the bed with his eyes closed. Although he hadn't asked Henry yet, he was already secretly looking forward to going to the mountain to watch the meteor. Early the next morning, as soon as Samuel came out of his room, he saw Henry. The man looked at him and asked, "How's your leg?" Samuel walked a couple of steps in front of him and said, "As you can see, disabled but with a strong will, completely healthy." Then the two of them got on the elevator and went downstairs. At the dining table, Samuel looked at Henry's expression and tentatively said, "I heard there will be a meteor in a few days." Henry responded indifferently, Samuel said, "I've never seen a meteor in my life." Henry raised his eyes and took a look. Almost instantly, he saw through the other person's little thought and asked, "What did you say?" "It's nothing." Samuel was a bit coy. "I'm just asking if you'd like to go with me to have a look." "Where?" "On the mountain." Samuel's eyes sparkled. "There are camping spots on the mountain. Then we can watch the meteors at night." The man here was silent for a moment. He wanted to decline as the other's expectant eyes were shining, but the words got stuck in his throat. "You're going?" Samuel quickly nodded his little head. "Yes. People who go to watch the meteors, most of them go with their partners or husbands. I also want you to accompany me. Aren't you my husband?" Then he wriggled his butt and sat beside him. "Will you go? Will you go?" Henry looked at his face and said stiffly, "As you wish." Samuel knew that the other had agreed. He hugged his arm tightly. "Henry, you're so nice. I love you even more." Henry looked at Samuel, who was hugging him and saying sweet words, and turned his head away stiffly. "Damn it, he's really good at this. Henry, you're so nice. I can't live without you." Samuel hugged his arm and babbled, "I'm willing to have a balanced diet of meat and vegetables in this life in exchange for marrying you in the next life." The man glanced at him. Samuel asked, "What's wrong? Don't you think there's something wrong?" Samuel shook his head, but he also understood what the other meant. "No, it's just having a balanced diet of meat and vegetables." Samuel hugged his arm. "I never make vows that I can't keep. This is also for the good of both of us." Looking at the other's confused look, Samuel continued, "If I said I'd only eat vegetarian food in this life in exchange for marrying you in the next life, would you believe it?" Thinking of the rabbit meat from yesterday, Henry replied woodenly, "No. If I said I would always be a vegetarian, do you think I could do it?" Thinking of the abandoned night run, Henry spoke again, "No, you can't." Samuel clapped his hands. "So that's why I said I'd have a balanced diet of meat and vegetables when I made the vow." Samuel hugged the other's arm and shyly lowered his head. "It's not for anything else, but just to be with you in the next life." Then he began to make excuses for his balanced diet of meat and vegetables. "It's not that I'm not willing to make a vow that tests one's will. I'm just afraid that if I make a mistake one day and fail to keep it, then we won't be able to be together in the next life. We won't be able to be together in the next life." The young man's voice lingered in his ear, like a cat's wagging tail gently brushing against the skin, making it itchy. "After all." Henry lowered his eyes and looked at the other. The other's eyes were clear and innocent, and he didn't avoid Henry's gaze at all. Henry's eyes involuntarily swept down the straight nose and landed on the lips. The man's Adam's apple rolled, but in an instant, he frowned tightly. "After all, what?" Samuel's fair and innocent face broke into a smile. His eyes were like crescent moons, bright and clear. "Do you want to know?" The man looked at him without saying a word. "Lower your head and I'll tell you." The mischievous tone was like a heart-shaped arrow stabbing at his heart one after another. Henry's already frowning face turned even colder. His heart was beating faster in his chest. This feeling was really bad, making him feel restless and confused. Restless and confused. Then he turned his head away and said coldly, "Forget it if you don't want to say." First, Samuel just wanted to tease the other and make him lower his head. Seeing that the other really didn't want to listen, he quickly leaned his head over. "Listen, listen." The other had promised to go to the mountain with him. He hadn't even finished his excited speech in his mind. Seeing the other with a cold face and not looking at him, Samuel whispered in his ear, "Listen, I was just teasing you. There's always some fun between partners." The man lowered his eyes and looked at him. Seeing the other's flattering face, he said, "What did you want to say just now?" Samuel grinned and then whispered in the man's ear, "I like you the most." With a thud, Henry felt his heart sink suddenly. He lifted his arm and pulled it out of the man's embrace. Samuel was surprised. "What's wrong?" Henry's face was stiff. "Don't say such things to me next time." "Why?" The man felt his heart beating more and more heavily and a dull pain. Then he took a deep breath. "I don't want to hear it." Samuel looked at the man. "Really?" Henry's face was cold. "Yes." The next moment, Samuel shortened the distance between them again. Henry instantly became vigilant. "What are you doing?" Samuel looked calm. "Nothing. I just want to talk to you again." "What?" Seeing the man's expression relax slightly, Samuel quickly and forcefully held the man's face and then turned his head and whispered in the man's ear, "I like you. I like you. I like you." For a moment, it seemed as if his earlobe was burned by something hot. Henry yanked the man away. "Samuel." Samuel was in an extremely good mood because the man agreed to go to the mountain with him. Even if the man had a black face, he didn't care. "Yes." The man's strong chest heaved. His handsome face was so cold that it seemed to form ice chips. "Shameless." Samuel looked at the man and quickly comforted him. "Don't be angry. I'm just joking with you." Henry looked at him, let go of the man, and then turned around and entered the restaurant. He quickly entered his fingerprint and got on the elevator. After the elevator door closed, the man didn't immediately press the floor button. It was silent in the elevator. Then a deep voice sounded, hoarse as if it had been suppressed for a long time. A swear word. Henry took a deep breath, reached up and pressed the button for the third floor. His eyebrows were still tightly furrowed, but his earlobes seemed to be filled with blood, and the color didn't fade for a long time. In the afternoon, after Samuel took a nap, he wanted to take someone out for a walk. A little head peeked out in front of the door. "Henry." After hearing the voice, Henry paused with the pen in his hand, but his gaze didn't leave the desktop. He just said indifferently, "What's the matter?" "The weather is nice today. Let's go for a walk. Okay?" Henry looked up. "Whatever." Hearing this, Samuel quickly came to the person's side. "Then let's go." Henry was stunned for a moment, looking at the person's home clothes. "Aren't you going to get ready?" Samuel looked solemn. "Did you forget?" "What?" "I'm the successor of socialism." Henry was confused about the relationship between the two for a moment. "Are you ready?" Samuel smiled confidently. "Always ready." When they were leaving the door, they happened to meet the junk collector coming back from scavenging. Samuel hadn't seen the other person for a while. After seeing him, he waved enthusiastically. "Uncle." The junk collector was startled when he saw them. "Oh, you're back." Samuel nodded. "Yes, I came back a few days ago." Then Samuel couldn't hold back his joy and looked at the person and said, "Uncle, do you know there will be a meteor shower in a few days?" The junk collector at his age didn't pay much attention to this. "I don't know. Are you going to watch it?" Samuel nodded. "Yes." Saying that, he pointed at Henry with a smile. "He'll accompany me to watch it on the mountain." The young man smiled charmingly, like a child who couldn't hide a secret. Samuel said a few more words to the rag-picking old man and then pushed Henry away. Summer was coming to an end and the weather was gradually getting cooler. Looking at the slightly yellowing leaves on the trees, Samuel said, "It will be autumn in a week." Henry responded indifferently, "Yeah." Samuel leaned forward. "By then, we won't be able to take walks like this anymore." Henry frowned after hearing this and asked, "Why?" Samuel replied, Because it will be cold without wearing long johns. Samuel looked at the summer clothes on the person and said, "It's cold in the morning and evening but hot at noon in autumn. It's easy to catch a cold, so you can't get chilled." After dinner in the evening, everyone went back to their respective rooms. Samuel lay in bed and called Isabella on the phone. After a few rings, the other side answered the call. "Sister," Samuel said familiarly, "it's me. How did it go?" "Henry will go." The other person's voice obviously paused. "What?" Before Henry and Samuel got married, Isabella and her friends had invited Henry to go, but most of the time, the result was that he was too busy or didn't want to go. Suddenly, Samuel's ears buzzed from the loud voice. He moved the phone away. "Henry said he'll go." Isabella asked, "Did he agree right away?" "Sort of." Then he only heard the person excitedly say, "Which mountain are we going to in a few days? Do I need to prepare anything?" Isabella really didn't expect Henry to agree to go to the mountain with them. But besides being surprised, she didn't forget to answer the question. It's the mountain on the outskirts of the city. Many people often go camping there, and there's a nice shop at the foot of the mountain. Samuel said, "Oh, do I need to bring anything?" Isabella thought for a while. She had already arranged most of the things. "Just bring your change of clothes. I've arranged everything else." Samuel had a sudden inspiration. "You're so kind." Isabella was very straightforward. "You're welcome." After spending a few days full of anticipation, on that day, Samuel got up very early to pack his things, but for some reason, his eyelid kept twitching. Then he knocked on Henry's door. "Henry, are you up?" There was a sound from inside the room. Not long after, the door opened. "What's the matter?" Samuel said excitedly, "We're going camping today. I'm here to help you pack your things." Henry said calmly, "I can do it myself." Samuel said, "Let me help you." The man refused firmly. "No." Saying that, he closed the door again. When he came out again, he was indeed carrying a black sports bag. Samuel took it smoothly. "Let's go." Henry was silent for a while and then asked, "How are we going?" Samuel said, "By car." "You're driving?" "No one else. I can't drive on mountain roads." For some reason, after saying this, Samuel obviously saw the man let out a sigh of relief. Pouting, he said, "You don't trust me?" Henry said, "I trust you." "Then why did you sigh with relief?" "Because I trust that you can't drive on mountain roads." Soon after, Isabella called, "Sister, I'm here. Come here with Henry." Samuel made a small okay gesture. When they entered the villa area, they saw an SUV parked by the road not far away. Just as Samuel was about to step forward, he suddenly saw a head poking out of the window of an SUV and saw a very familiar pair of nostrils. Samuel instantly widened his eyes. "Owen!" Owen almost couldn't believe his eyes as he looked at the person not far away. "Samuel!" He finally knew why his left eyelid had been twitching this morning. Owen's eyes were wide open, looking as if he was grinding his teeth in anger. He really didn't expect to meet Samuel here. Seeing Samuel coming, Isabella got out of another car and waved to her. "Sister." Samuel forced a smile for a moment. "Well, let's go. Everyone is here. Let's hit the road." Samuel suddenly felt as if she was really going to her doom. Samuel glanced at Owen sitting in the car, stiffly turned her head away, and held on to the last shred of hope. "Are only the three of us going today?" Isabella shook her head. "Of course not. There are 8 people in total. Apart from the relatives we brought, the rest are playmates that Henry and I have known since childhood. Don't worry. There won't be any awkwardness. We have a good relationship." Samuel nodded stiffly. Isabella said, "But now, except for the drivers, there is 1 seat left in each car. See which one you want to sit in." Samuel was shocked. "I'm not sitting with Henry?" Isabella suddenly seemed like a villain who was separating a loving couple. But seeing Samuel's pitiful little expression, she felt a sense of pleasure in bullying others. Why? Can't bear to part? I did it on purpose. I just want to separate you two. Samuel was greatly shocked and said, You are so vicious. Isabella gave a sinister smile and said, You're welcome. Saying that, she beckoned William to get off the car and said, William, come here and take Henry away. William, a nearly 1.9 meter tall man, got out of the car and said, Is Henry going to sit with us? Isabella nodded and said, Break up the lovers. William said, I like it. Seeing Henry about to be pushed away, Samuel was so scared that he quickly chased after him. Then he grabbed Henry and wouldn't let him go, saying, I want to sit with Henry. Henry was stunned for a moment and looked at Samuel with reluctant eyes. Just as he was about to say something, he was quickly pushed away by William. Henry. Samuel stood there like a woman waiting for her husband, looking at Henry longingly as he was forced into the car. Then he looked at Isabella and said pitifully, Don't you think you're being too much? Isabella stroked her chin and said, It seems to be a little bit. Samuel looked serious and said, It's not too late for you to regret now. Isabella smiled and said, But I'm very happy doing this. Isabella patted Samuel on the shoulder and then pointed to the off-road vehicle at the back and said, You sit in that one. Samuel was greatly shocked and said, You're not sitting with me either. Isabella looked at him and smiled, saying, I specially arranged this for you. There's a boy in the entertainment industry who is the younger brother of my friend in that car. He's a very popular child star who has been in the industry for more than a decade. You're a senior to him. I heard that he's here to relax after a recent breakup. Gabriel also has an entertainment company. You can go and learn more about it. You can learn more about it. Samuel? Understand what? To prevent being defrauded in the future. Samuel shook his head. I don't think it's necessary. Why? No one can swindle money from me.